of Liquidity Spaces. Today with us, we have the pleasure of having Wolfram as a guest. Wolfram is the co-founder and COO, so Chief Operating Officer of Particula, which, in a few words, as the Bloomberg for ESG tokens, aims to create a holistic database for tokenized slash sustainable assets and ecosystem-based tokens that offers a trusted one-step solution for investors and companies. That being said, Wolfram, I think it would be suitable to start with a little intro about your background for everybody to be aware of, and also be quite intriguing to gauge and find out how you got involved with the Particula and how this project came about.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. You kind of like summarized it nicely, and it's great to be here. My name is Wolfram Menser. Yeah, I'm 50 years old, so I've been around for a while. I have a background in the software industry. I've lived abroad for many years. I spent 12 years in the US. I founded a company in China. I've lived in South Africa. And yeah, well, it's not even that long ago that I fell into the rabbit hole of blockchain technology. That was in 2021 only. And I met Tim at the Technical University of Munich, where we did the certified blockchain and distributed ledger technology master. And yeah, we immediately clicked, and he and Nadine, they had an idea. Our original idea was tokenizing forests, and we are a BFG-backed startup. BFG is the Blockchain Founders Group, and we are part of their accelerator program, and they did the pre-seed funding with us. And yeah, here we are with Particula. We're in an early stage of our company, and yeah, it's a fast-moving space, and we see lots of need and opportunity to solve some problems that other market participants are not yet focusing on. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about today.
That's awesome. I wasn't aware that you had such a diverse past, let's just say, with experiences in the US and China as well. Ranzo, I think it would be quite suitable to sum up also how you got involved with blockchain, because I think the destination is clear because we're all here sort of gathered in the same context speaking to each other, but I think the routes and roads leading to the destination is always quite diverse and different, right? So it'll be quite interesting to find out and for people to know how you got involved specifically with blockchain, summarizing your journey from your perspective.
Yes, so exactly. So I was building a e-commerce store first time. I think it was 1999. We were building the first like an online store for mountain bike parts and such. And then so that's after that I've always been on online business one way or another. First on a e-commerce, then on the media. And then I lived a little bit in America and worked for the company that was like kind of a biggest app builder for then open Twitter. That was 2008-9 or 2009, and shortly after that, then I started to really get into the financing part on a finance business, and at the same time as I was still linked to online media. I started to trade bonds, like traditional bonds, and that led, and of course the whole online business led then that I started to study Bitcoin 2013, and 2015 we then started the first business around blockchain. That was a Bitcoin ETI, exchange traded instrument that we managed to list on Frankfurt Stock Exchange, but we never managed to then keep it there because our partner went uncompliant and we had to delist that product. But then, of course, forward from that, then we did the 2016 to 2019, before the really that crypto winter kicked in. We did a token market from Gibraltar. That was a very successful startup and did raise like over 300 million to 30 startups in the form of ICOs, initial coin offerings. So that's the background, and then forward to this date. Then it was a couple of years ago when really started to think that what is the blockchain as a financial kind of technology best for, and that's where then the sustainable finance, where you have to run both sustainability data and financial data side by side. That's where blockchain really makes sense, and here we are now, building a next generation carbon markets on blockchain. Me and Wolfram and everybody else on the call, pretty much.
Awesome. And I think it would be a good place to start the convo with the latest map that Particula put together, which, by the way, was, I think, in my view, quite illustrating, and I wasn't aware that there was so many players, even though it's such a nascent and at its early stages space. And I see, because I have it in front of me, that you've sort of broke it down in terms of tokenized carbon credits and crypto native credits, carbon NFTs, and DAOs. Wolfram, I think it'll be quite interesting to find out the reasoning as to why you did this, why you felt that there was a need to map players based on these three categories, these three tiers, and were you surprised to sort of come across so many projects that also might be involved in these different tiers, but you had to label them necessarily?
Yeah, well, I mean, projects, if you really analyze the market, what we're doing, for a living, so to speak, projects are popping up every week. And I'm sure later on, we're also going to talk about the non-carbon token projects, because we are currently working on some 350 additional projects from the ESG space. But yeah, the industry map that we created are pretty much the 150 or so token projects that we're zooming in right now. And we felt that kind of like there are many different classification criteria that you can slice and dice those projects, by the type of project and where they are regionally and on what blockchain they are. But we felt that one of the high level criteria to group them would be, whether they are credits that have originally been issued on a traditional registry, and then they were migrated onto the blockchain, or that they were pretty much projects and credits that were crypto native. That's the first group. Then there is the group of the NFTs, which, just as you know best, I'm sure Renzo can elaborate on your NFT project a little bit, that I also know well. It has an art component, a gamification component, and the typical aspects of NFTs like rarity and so forth. Oftentimes, but not exclusively, those NFT-related projects are tailored a little more towards individuals rather than corporations. And then there's the group of the DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organizations, which kind of like form their own group. And we felt that it would be very interesting. I mean, there are quite a few overviews that you would find if you search the web, but we haven't come across one that is as comprehensive and complete as ours. And that's what we're currently working on. And the task is to really classify and categorize them in all of the definitions that we have come up with.
Yeah, so let's start on that one. Like, on a question to you from that, is there now any crypto, like kind of a token, like native carbon credits at the market yet? So they are natively issued on a blockchain.
There are. I mean, let's get a little bit deeper into it, and that we've written some Medium articles that outline that. So I mean, we all know it started with Toucan. Toucan went ahead
and Moss,
yeah, and they went ahead and they found a way to basically take the carbon credits from, in this case, Vera, and they were retired, and then they were brought on chain. And with the retiring process, the buyer gets a certificate, and that certificate was used to basically mint and create a new token on the blockchain registry. Now, as probably most of you know, Vera and Gold Standard weren't too happy about it because, the credits showed as retired in their system while they, in a way, had a second life on the blockchain. So, they kind of like stopped that process, and they said, well, that's not the purpose of this. So another way, instead of the one-way street, and that's something, and it leads to the answer of your question, is the two-way street. So, for example, Thallo and some other companies, they've created a two-way bridge where pretty much the blockchain registry is keeping in sync with the traditional registry. And that is one way. But to answer your question, Renzo, we all know that the current infrastructure is just not suitable to scale the market to where it has to be to solve the climate crisis. I mean, it's paper-based, and that's why the crypto native tokens occur.
Exactly. So last year, when that was end of May, when then Vera, the world's largest with a 75% market share, world's largest registry, then decided to stop this, let's call it down to a year long or a little bit less than that, experiment of letting mainly Toucan to bridge carbon credits, VSCs or VCSs from Vera to blockchain. Then that one ended there after 23 or 25 million issued, because they had no idea where these on their registry retired offset carbon credits were.
Exactly.
So they decided to call it off and said that we will follow up with the new rules of what is that, because they cannot be offsetted when they are there. People are buying already offsetted assets, and that's kind of fundamentally wrong. Even though that there was a secondary layer that whoever has it, whoever offsets it on Toucan can call themselves that they did the offsetting. And actually, Gold Standard was still on a science and never let anyone to tokenize Gold Standard's crates. And then they decided also I understood they were quite close to let it happen, but then they took a step back as well. And as of today, what is today? 19th of January, 9 months later, 8 months later, nothing has happened since. So basically, with the two largest registers, the tokenized world has been on a standby since last May.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a consultation phase, and companies could kind of like pledge their version of which direction Vera and Gold Standard should go, and that's still pending. I think now in Q1 they will release their decision, and this will be something that the market is waiting for, because it will be kind of like a milestone, seeing which direction we're all heading. But quite frankly, you had asked, like, are there crypto native credits? And the answer is definitely yes, because what is happening? I mean, Vera and Gold Standard have created those methodologies. I don't think there are too many companies and people out there that would fundamentally, question what they have achieved, and that's all good. But they are slow, they are expensive, and they have turned out to be a huge bottleneck. And the market forces are just finding new ways. And companies like Nori, for example, or Region Network, they kind of like said, what? As long as we are keeping the high standards in terms of the methodologies applied, we're just bypassing them. We don't technically need a traditional registry just because they've been around for a long time doesn't mean that has to be the future, especially if they can't keep up with the pace that we need. And we have our own registry, and we have our own ways of monitoring the results of the project with new state-of-the-art digital and AI tools. And we call those the crypto native credits, because they kind of like bypass the traditional system altogether, and they get born on chain, so to speak.
That's true. I actually, that's true. I totally forgot that there is Nori and there is Region that has been issuing, so to say, directly to as a tokenized version. So they don't have available even like a non-tokenized versions. That's true. By the way, then if we now quickly have to say, because today or yesterday was the day that of course there was a big expose yesterday on the Guardian.
I read that, yeah, and it's been viral. Yeah.
Exactly, and that is of course big blow for the whole sector. We cannot now say that no, it hurt us. It hurts like an FTX, not on same scale, but like an FTX.
Let's try to summarize what actually happened for the people that are listening. Like, what is the
yes,
headline?
Please, yeah, go
so
for
essentially,
it.
what happened was
yes.
that a group of three, let's just call them journalistic consortium. I forget, the Guardian and two others.
No, top-notch investigating journals. Yeah, basically.
I mean, self-classified as top-notch, then always remains to be seen, because the Guardian is the Guardian. But anyway, they basically ran a 9-month-long study, basically ascertaining or trying to verify the quality behind the REDD Plus credits. REDD Plus, for the people listening, stands for the reduction of emissions from deforestation and the destruction of forests. So it's about essentially, in a few words and plain in layman terms, maintaining forests as they are, and finding a baseline for these projects in a given area, and then over the life cycle of the projects, maintain the forest intact, and then issue credits off the back of the difference between the baseline, as in if the project didn't happen, what would happen here? Would there be a deforestation? With the activity of preservation of this forest, how many credits can we issue as a result of our conservation efforts? And then this article basically slated, let's just say, this Vera credits, saying that 90% of them essentially are worthless. And Ron, to correct me if I'm wrong, the REDD Plus credits account for the 40% of the amount of credits that Vera has issued to date, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I think this is definitely a pickle, especially for us, because we're involved in this, but not directly, because we're yet to partake and down that route, but more on that in the future. But do you think, let's just focus on Vera for a second, because we just talked about the role that they are now keeping as maintaining as a gatekeeper, installing the whole innovation process behind tokenization. They're being very pragmatic and prudent. Do you think that basically they're getting fired at from all fronts, right? So right now they have the tokenization, blockchain role. Do you think that they'll have, there's too much on their plate? Eventually they'll just have to recognize the potential behind blockchain and basically revamp and update all their methodologies, including REDD Plus, or what?
Well, I personally think, I think that's going to happen anyways. And I think there have been heard statements that they are open for ways to digitize their processes, because they know, they are aware of the fact that they have to do something. I personally think the actual problem is something else. If you think about it, 95% of all carbon credits in the market are avoidance credits, and it's a lot easier, or actually, to say it the other way around, it's a lot harder to prove the true additionality. There is little doubt in the scientific community, how much carbon can be stored in a certain size forest, for example. But what you can do, I can claim and say, you know what, I actually wanted to cut down this rainforest, and I'm not doing that. So I can issue credits for that, but it's very hard to prove that I don't just go a couple of miles down the road and cut the rainforest there. So I think somewhat the problem is just the fact that we're for the most part talking about avoidance projects and avoidance credits, and I think the entire system will eventually move more and more towards removal credits, true removal credits, and maybe, I mean, this is to be seen. Maybe it's a little easier from the methodology point of view to prove the true additionality and permanence. But the thing is, what is a removal project? Let's say, let's take an example. I avoid a piece of rainforest in South America to be cut down. It has the benefit, by the way, also that I can credit or get the credits in a timely manner, because the forest that is still standing can continue to absorb CO2, and I can immediately issue the credit. Now, what if that rainforest was cut down already and I have to plant new trees? So that would be leading to a true removal project, and this is where a new category of carbon tokens come also into play, the so-called forward tokens, because the timing between the investment and the investor receiving the credits is much longer, because the project needs the money to plant the trees now, but it will take years before the trees grow into a forest that can absorb CO2, and you can issue those credits. So I think back to the original question, I think part of the problem is that the majority of credits are all avoidance credits, and it's just harder to prove the true additionality. But beside that, you're right. Verra and Gold Standard, they will have to recognize that they will also have to do something on the technological side.
Yes, and that's now basically in a way, or now proven that they cannot stop the development or the innovation here, because the World Bank together with the International Emissions Trading Association has now formed Carbon Action Data Trust, which went live in the beginning of this year, so 2-3 weeks ago, and that is a block. Even though that it doesn't tokenize, it is the blockchain based. So now in the future they have to already now plug into that blockchain based data system, their system, as that's the highest level that this CAD or CAD, this is the highest level of kind of a meta registry, if you will, that will be there according to World Bank's plans.
Okay, let's give more info and context on that as well. So CAD stands for Climate Action Data Trust, and it's essentially an endeavor, because it is an endeavor at this point, by the World Bank and a bunch of other partners to try and centralize and create a data ecosystem where you can basically go to this unified place and find all the information from all the registries, and you have all the data at the at arm's length, and you can basically conduct all your researches saying, okay, I want to back Cookstove project in Ecuador, can I find it? Or I want to back a Red Plus project in I don't know, India, can I find it? Because right now you would have to go and look for it in all the different registries, and it's quite a fragmented market from that standpoint. But I think it's all being developed as we speak, and it's there's constantly new updates on the topic. And but okay, now always
So
yeah go on, Ranzo, sorry, because
this is so extensive topic that I think that in order not to suffocate our listeners here, let's go back to this in my opinion, let's go back to this exciting thing that has now been Wolfram has been working on, which is the forwards, and you've been talking with many issuers, probably almost everybody in the market, that what is their take of how the forwards market will work. So please tell us what kind of picture we're talking and you're doing that great blog post about it. So what is your take now, the overview, hearing different approaches by different players, that how will this forward market, in your opinion, pan out?
Yeah. First of all, I really think from the from the point of view that more and more removal projects will become relevant, this is where forwards come into play. Another interesting aspect, if you think about it, you had mentioned it earlier, with Vera and Gold Standard putting tokenization through their systems on hold, forwards could still work because there are many players, for example, like Green Trade or also Thello did that, who could issue forward tokens, and the forward tokens are pretty much just a voucher for a future carbon credit that will be issued. So a company is investing into a project. That project uses, for example, those funds to reforest and plant trees, and in return, the investor gets a forward token, and that forward token also lives on the blockchain with all the benefits the blockchain provides. And then at a later point, there are two options that we are observing. Either when the true certificates are being issued, then the forward token is burned. I guess our listeners know that that's the mechanism where it's like archived, and then in return for the voucher, the investor gets the true carbon certificate. And that, of course, then requires that once or if the body, the registry that is issuing the carbon credit is a traditional one, then we have the same kind of situation that was banned. And by the way, not everyone banned it. For example, the biocarbon registry still allows it. So that is one option, switching the forward token with the real tokenized carbon credit. And then the other way is, the easy way out is just basically the forward token would get burned, and then the investor would get the old-fashioned paper certificate for the carbon credit as we know them. And those kind of like are the two ways we're observing.
But Wolfram, always on this topic, because I think carbon forwards are quite, in my opinion, they're a promising vehicle to facilitate the transfer of funds from the emitters to kickstart projects, right? Which is more often the issues that project developers find, that there is the lack of financing. So this could provide an alternative access and source of financing which they need to kickstart these projects. But from your standpoint, where's your opinion? Like, what is the stage for forwards to be issued for a specific project? Like, how early do they have to be at the project definition stage, or can a project already have sort of kicked into motion and then forwards can be implemented later on, or is it something that has to be disclosed and agreed upon with all the relevant partners and stakeholders at the onset, at the beginning of the endeavor?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it starts as early as pretty much tokenizing investment rights. I don't know if you've lately followed what, for example, Ivy protocol does. It's like they issue, that's a stage even before the forward token, where they issue tokens that are considered like an investment right to even invest into a project. And then the next step would be pretty much the phase where the project has to be defined and clearly described, and at a certain stage, so that a price can already be developed, because it's like you have to have a price estimate. Of course, those projects come typically at a discount, because there's a higher risk of the question whether or not truly the amount of carbon will be absorbed and the amount of credits will be issued. But it has to be at a point where the project is fully described, calculated, and ready to go once the funding is available.
And in terms of lock-ins, right? And in terms of let's just talk timeframes for a second here. How early would I be able to say I buy a carbon forward today for a given project in Gabon or Tanzania, for argument's sake? Would I be able to then realize the carbon forward will materialize turning into a carbon credit? What is the default estimate in terms of time frame? Is it a year, 2 years? I know it depends from the project, but let's just talk afforestation and reforestation. So, for example, planting where there's nothing there. From your perspective, what do you think?
Oh, I think I have to admit I'm not a super expert in that part of science, so to speak. But we're talking about years. We're not talking about 1 or 2 years, because that's 7, 8, 10 years. But you are right, Eric, in saying it depends. It's a financing method, and you would also see the approach, for example, with investors who would finance, for example, even tech-driven carbon credits, like the direct air capture or something like that. Basically, you're investing money into a project that has then the funding to develop something, whether it's developing a nature-based solution someplace, or whether it's developing a technical solution that will then reward your investment by receiving the underlying credits, and depending on the investment type, that could be a fairly wide range of months or years.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense. And Rancer, I think you also wanted to touch upon the role that the exchange can play in, which is one of our products, it's in the pipeline, will play ones for these carbon forwards and other carbon assets, right?
Yeah, first I say a couple of words, because I've talked with some of these project developers in Africa, and of course they see these forwards in some cases being quite fast. I would say 3 to 5 years process, because the type of trees that they have there, mangroves, that grows really fast, and basically then already saturate on their carbon capturing on 20-25 years. So that's an interesting that there are some types of trees that can convert forwards way faster than others, years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But then so what we see here, that this forwards market, exactly, I think that it's almost like a crowdfunding in a way.
Yeah.
There's a crowdfunding aspects, and then I've talked now this week in London, for example. I met some large financiers of the carbon projects, forest projects, and they were then seeing the benefit when I was talking about this forwards. They see the benefit of, oh, nice, we have now here like kind of a normal people, retail people, individuals joining these projects as supporters, or they make the noise, they follow it, they are enthusiasts about the climate change, and that can be beneficial for everybody, that they get the normal people get into the same deals with same terms with these large, who invest tens of millions on projects, or at least hundreds of thousands. They can get to join. So there's this community aspect of it that was a very big thing for the first 10 years of a crypto market.
Absolutely. And by the way, just a little side note, the same is true for other types of investment that we are also looking at for our database. It's not the primary focus right now, but tokenized sustainable assets, because the average retail investor won't be able to invest in just a forest. You can't just show up somewhere and buy a forest, or you can't just buy a part of a wind park or a solar farm, because those are asset classes that require a certain ticket size and large potential investors are locked out of that market because it's just not accessible to them. And absolutely, the same is true for the forward credits. You mentioned the word crowdfunding. I think that's a good comparison. And maybe another aspect is like, what role would blockchain play? Let's take a look what it would look like if you don't have a blockchain, because then if you're holding a contract for a future release of carbon credits, if you for whatever reason want to sell those, you would have to first of all find somebody, which is probably close to impossible, and then come up with a new agreement that would kind of like transfer your agreement to the next person. So the bottom line is that type of market without blockchain technology is highly illiquid, and that I think is one of the key aspects, because once we tokenize those types of credits, not only do we kind of like benefit from all the well-known blockchain benefits in general, like transaction speed and cost and all of that stuff, but they become available for the entire DeFi space with new opportunities that I think we haven't even thought about. I mean, we know staking and some of those mechanisms that all of a sudden become possible for things like tokens in general and forward tokens, but I think we're only seeing the very early beginning of all the tools and instruments that will develop once that technology is in place.
Absolutely, and this is the I think that forward will be one of the most exciting products on our up and coming Likvidi exchange. So secondary market exchange that is full on blockchain, and there exactly that when you buy into these deals, they become more liquid, so you can then actually sell them to someone else thanks to crypto style blockchain exchange like decentralized exchange that we're building. And that might be the most popular category there. Most I think that it will be like speculating on these forwards. And of course, okay, people don't like the word speculating, but that is how most of the markets work. That there is investors, there's people who need money, there's investors, and then there's traders and speculators, and that all these people together makes exciting market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as long
and also,
as
like, why do we need
funding...
to build separate exchange for carbon? That has become now all the time as we work on it on a secondary market trading platform. That becomes clearer and clearer because we learn now that okay, in the moment that when Gold Standard and Vera says yes, now the assets can be tokenized and can be traded, they will all have their own KYC rules, compliance rules. So we cannot go to Uniswap. Uniswap cannot take those assets without any KYC rules at the moment. And what we're building on a platform is that anyone who puts the asset there on a platform, for example, carbon project or carbon trading company who has many carbon credits to tokenize and put on a market, then they can set per asset these compliance rules. And that is very important in order to make a market that is not full-on cowboy market that will be then closed down in 18 months.
Absolutely. And then as a sort of side note, and something that you mentioned and alluded to at the beginning of the call, Wolfram, regarding other types of assets, let's just say, that can be tokenized. Like, for example, just in my daily job, I was sort of going through the registries of different other market players, and one of them you've mapped as well in your overview of the market is OFP, right? Open Forest Protocol. Yep. And they have their own registry, and I think what they're doing is extremely interesting. Everybody can go and read their white paper, but they essentially want to streamline, let's just say, the MRV, so monitoring, reporting, and verification process by making it more accessible. And essentially, they want to turn a given plot of land into an NFT or different NFTs, and they basically account as proof of ownership of a given plot of land, and each with their own characteristics. And that can be done, or they're attempting to do it for land, right? And everything that comes on top of it as a result, so positive externalities, carbon credits, and da 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 da. You alluded to that in your overview. You also had, what can I say? You omitted the inclusion of another 350 projects, right? That have to do, not only, they don't have to do specifically with carbon assets, but we're talking about credits from water and biodiversity. So sort of taking into account what I just said from an OFB project and approach standpoint regarding their approach to tokenizing land, how do you think and how do you envision that happening for something like biodiversity and water, which are already
Exactly. So walk
hard
us. That's
concepts?
exactly. So please walk us through, because I'm this water. Then there's a
Yeah.
green energy, and all these different. Let's leave now the carbon world in as it's forest stuff aside for a second, and walk us through what else do you see there that will be tokenized over the next coming years.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. The short answer is everything. Seriously. No, but hey, if we take a step back, what is the underlying problem? And I think once you look at it that way, then you will see why indeed everything can be tokenized. For example, let's once get back to the forest. The only way to really in the traditional finance world to put a price tag on a forest is when you cut it down and you take a look at the timber that you're getting. That's the way you have a price for the forest besides the land. And there is no mechanism to price the value of a living forest, and that's where the carbon credits come into the place. But let's say you're a forest owner, and back to the water, an example that I like that I think is somewhat easy to understand. Forests are one of the major sources of filtering groundwater. The municipality next door is just pumping the water, and the municipality is selling it to the people, but the forest owner would have the expense of managing the forest, and the forest owner would not get any return for the service that his forest is doing, the filtering of the water. And I think that is the underlying mechanism that sometimes helps understand. It's like that there has to be a price for things like clean water, or even for biodiversity. I mean, it's very hard to come up and say, what is it worth that this piece of land is the habitat for animals, and it's the foundation for people that live there, and social communities. They strive because they have that forest. And if it's easy to kind of like take it away and measure the price of the timber, but it's somewhat more difficult to have the counter calculation and say, well, what is it worth if that doesn't happen? And I think that's the mechanism, and that's for example, how water credits come into place, and I don't know, we see all kinds of really interesting things. There's even a token, you probably have to smile, but where there is a value for elephants in India, because with their trunk, they have a positive contribution to higher CO2 emissions, because they kind of like go through the soil and enable the soil to better absorb carbon. So even credits for those animals we have already seen. I mean, it gets a little bit wild, and you have to think about it for a second. But I think in general that is the underlying concept. It's like funding projects, funding, communities, and generating a value that in the traditional non-ESG and non-sustainability world just simply doesn't exist.
Yes, and by the way, one kind of related token that I got explained about a few days ago was like renewable energy token, and I was thinking that what is that? Like you just buy renewable energy, and you don't need to turn that into token. That's what you do if you're a company or individual. You just buy green energy. And then I got explained that on many places in the world, actually the grid is only running on coal or any other fossils and not renewable. And on those places, there are people who still want to be green, and they have to use coal, but then they can buy these nowhere else to be used credits to offset that, in a way offset, but in a way to then call it that they use the green renewable energy. That was still mystery to me, but that's how they explained it.
Right. And yeah, because I think it's look, clearly assigning value to abstract things, it's almost like an endless endeavor, right? Like we'll never truly get to the bottom of it, or trying to get to the end of it, but we can only learn by doing and sort of experimenting with the trial and error approach, right? So even what you were saying, Wolfram, it's extremely ambitious, right? So for example, because when you're talking about nature, we're, in my opinion, we've been around for millions of years as a species, and we're yet to fully comprehend it. Like, for example, when we're talking about climate change, we don't yet have a full grasp on climate data and necessarily what is the anthropogenic impact, so aka human-induced activities on the climate. So let alone trying to assign a value to protect a given ecosystem, where you have an ecosystem in Italy that is completely different from an ecosystem in Gabon or in Bangladesh, for example, right? So it's since your job from a particular standpoint is to standardize data or metrics for these tokenized nature-based assets, it's like you'll always be in business, because you always have new metrics, right? Standardizing, it seems like almost like a guy trying to reach for water in the desert,
that is certainly true, and that's quite a challenge right now. But there, one of the aspects of standardizing is also looking at standardization as a quality metric, because what we do at Particula, we are not looking only at the underlying projects and the methodologies that have been applied there, and let's say the in our case the blockchain technologies that are being applied. There is a key component that is all too often totally overlooked, and that's the aspect of regulation, taxes, finances, legal, and I think it is also important, and we look at it as a way of standardizing that those projects are fully disclosed, and that kind of like the investor or the buyer, the potential buyer, really knows what they are getting into. Because quite frankly, I think as long as the blockchain topic is still so prominent, I think personally this is a big part of why we are only seeing very slow mass adoption, because the voluntary carbon market is complex to begin with, and it's hard to understand. And if you add blockchain technology to it, it becomes even harder. So I think a key is for a CFO to make a decision of a company and buy tokenized carbon, to know what they're getting into, and standardization means Of course, the technical aspects, we'll probably in a future episode can talk again about the digital MRV, but it also means just a standardized way of providing a full 360-degree picture on a token so that buyers really know what they're getting into. And if you take a look behind the scene, for example, aspects like smart contract audits or really like a regulatory classification through one of our partners, many of the projects we have mapped there on the industry map don't even have that. And I suspect that quite a few of them won't be on the map by the end of the year, and others will be on the map. But I think that will also be hopefully one day soon a quasi industry standard that each of those tokens is fully disclosed, so that we have a transparent market that isn't as much at risk of being labeled like the crypto market, because I think that's a burden we have to carry right now, isn't it?
Yes, so that's exactly, so that's a good, really good point on this regulation. So you've been now following these European kind of crypto tokenization frameworks that are coming up, and other such like even all the way down to what is it, ISO standards and things. So how well, when you are now following exactly these these standardization efforts, how well do you see that they are now fitting to tokenized carbon assets?
I think, well, luckily and quite honestly, we will, start in Europe for a reason with the MiCA regulation, the markets in crypto asset from the European Union. I think we have a pretty clear framework, and it still depends on it's still not identical EU wide, so you have to consider national law as well. And I think regulation is badly needed in general to get the whole crypto and blockchain market out of the dark, so to speak, and converting blockchain technology to a technical infrastructure that happens behind the scene, where it's crystal clear to the investor and buyer what they're getting into. Right now, that is often not the case.
Exactly. Eric?
Yeah, no, brilliant point, and I think it's we're all yet to understand fully what's going to happen from a regulatory standpoint, and that's not only applicable to the voluntary carbon market, but the crypto market in general. And I think it was perfect yesterday when the the Department of Justice in the US said there was a major what can I say news announcement that was gonna shake the shake the crypto industry, and you find out, and it's just they're taking down like a minor player. So it's and then as a result, of course, the ETH, ETH, and BTC sort of dropped a few points, and then they recovered. There's a lot happening, and the people overstating facts when they're not yet fully conversational with the ins and outs of the crypto space. And that being said, I think one of the last point that I wanted to conclude on, I want to hear your take on this, on both of you, from Ransom and Wolfram. When do you think we'll get to a stage where we won't be talking about blockchain any longer as an enabler, but we'll just be focusing on the user cases that blockchain provides? So, for example, we don't necessarily talk about Nike in terms of the running shoes that it provides, but I'm trying to come up with a live example. Like, when will we sort of step away from blockchain as an enabler and just solely focus on the user cases and the applications that this special technology can facilitate in the future?
If I answer first, I said that this is something that we are definitely focusing from our side at Likvidi this year. So there's a term that some people have maybe heard already. It's kind of a Web 2.5. So from this fully like decentralized Web3, we are taking a step back now and basically making the wallets, for example, more like a PayPal, making like enabling Visa, Mastercards, and bank transfers, putting crypto addresses and kind of private and public key things they're behind and not shoveling to people's throat immediately two really new things: voluntary carbon market and Web3 at once. And I think that's where the problem is now for the so-called refi market, is that it's so techy, it's so Web3, that the overlap between the people who are there and corporations who want to offset, or individuals who want to offset, is almost non-existing. It's small. So we need to now make the whole blockchain will go background. It will be just like now databases.
I fully agree, Renzo. Fully agree. We are already seeing a growing number of players in the market who start hiding the term blockchain. Not too long ago, it was easier for us in a way. You would be able to just search their website, and you would see all kind of tech-related information fully disclosed. Talking about blockchains and tokens, and more of them are just hiding it. And I think that's a good move. And we too are, in a way, because that's our positioning, still here and there talk about tokens, but that will also eventually change. And we're just talking about the digital voluntary carbon market, or maybe on-chain carbon markets. But I agree. It's the same with the mass adoption, again, on the crypto side. As long as it is so techy and you have to have a wallet and stuff like that, mass adoption will not happen. I mean, just take a look at why Apple was successful. You can put a 3-year-old, and I have small kids, you can give them your cell phone and it takes 2 minutes to fully understand and figure it out. And if we manage to get blockchain to that status, I think we'll see the mass adoption fully go to the moon.
Exactly, and that's famously Steve Jobs on creating, after creating an iPod, said that no, forget the megabytes, forget all that. Just say that 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Exactly. You don't need a manual. It has to be so simple. Simplicity. That was his keyword.
Absolutely. And I think we'll give now the chance to anybody listening to ask a couple questions to either of you. And if not, I think we can wrap it up here. If you want to speak, just send a request and I'll grant you it, and then you can ask your cue.
I think it's all silent, yeah.
Everybody's shy. At school when nobody wants to get picked. But Wolfram, thank you very much for the super insightful conversation. I think I speak on behalf of everybody here at Likvidi, and we look forward to having you on again, as I'm sure that these conversations and topics will continue unfolding, so the content will be ever more present and relevant and actual.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, and we'll be in touch, and we'd be more than happy to come back, and maybe next time I bring one of my other co-founders. And thanks again, and have a good night.